Your 20s. It's probably the most confusing yet rewarding time of your life. You're turning 21, graduating college, moving out of your parents' house, getting into serious relationships, getting married, and making strides in your career. Wait, hold up, scratch that. That's the ideal 20. If we're being honest with ourselves, our 20s look a little something like this. The career you thought you wanted, yeah, it ain't working out. You're facing imposter syndrome daily, the relationships aren't going anywhere, and you feel like your life is on standby while you watch your friends take off and live their best life. We convince ourselves that this is what the 20s are, a decade where you just coast by, taking random jobs, traveling the world, and messing around. All that serious stuff is when you turn 30 and older. But what if I told you that your 20s are the time to make the moves you need to set up your life? The decisions you make now can have a lasting impact on your earning power and the life you live post-20s. How does that make you feel? If you're anything like me, that probably scared the living shit out of you. That's how I felt when I read The Defining Decade: Why Your 20s Matter by Dr. Meg Jay. While the book did jolt me into gaining more direction with my life, it left me feeling hopeful that I'm heading down the right track to make the most of this beautiful and crazy decade that we're in. I wanted to share my big takeaways from the book. I'll be splitting the video up into 3 major sections: career, relationships, and the brain and body. The first section, career. Arguably, the thing that occupies so much of our time post-college is our career. I mean, it's what defines most of us. We spend the majority of our day working, so it's important that we pick the right career. The problem is that for most of us, the career we thought we wanted post-college is no longer it. We either quit jobs because they got too hard or were giving us too much anxiety. Or you could be in a career right now that's stressing you out because you don't know the right way to manage the stress of it. You haven't built up the experience yet to thrive in it. One of the foundational topics that is brought up in the book is the need to build up identity capital. You can define identity capital as the things you do to build your ideal self. So in the context of career, building identity capital means taking jobs that may not be the ideal role but have aspects or traits that will allow you to progress in your career. Take for example, if you're a journalist. I graduated with a journalism degree, and depending on where you want to go with it, you will have multiple job options. Let's say you want to be a writer and your goal is to write for the New York Times. The chances of you getting to write for the Times out of college is very low, so you will most likely have to take a writing job for a smaller publication in order to build up your skill set and experience to eventually land at the Times. However, the trouble you can and I've run into is that you may reject their smaller entry-level job because it's not what you want. But by rejecting that position and risking staying unemployed for longer, you are hurting your long-term chances of getting a job at the Times. As I've mentioned before, I'm 25 and my peers and myself included have been going through identity crisis when it comes to work and our career. We either have left our jobs or are thought about leaving our jobs currently. And when you leave, the inclination is to go find a random easy job or go work at a coffee shop. However, the book argues that by taking those coffee shop jobs or those random BS jobs, you are significantly hurting the earning power you can have in the future and your overall career prospects. We'd all be much better off by taking those entry-level jobs and really focusing on building our career. In the book, she shares numerous stories about the people she worked with. Those who had very little identity capital faced more stress and anxiety about their future and were generally feeling more lost in life. However, the ones that had a legit job and were building that identity capital for themselves were more happy, satisfied, and fulfilled in life. For me, I've been very thankful that I've been able to have this YouTube channel while I've been searching for full-time work again. Having this YouTube channel has allowed me to build up my identity capital and the skills that I could provide an organization. Talking about jobs, Dr. J explained the importance of how weak ties will be compared to strong ties when it comes to your career. Your strong ties are your close friends, partners, family members, or anyone you consider to be really close to. Your weak ties are acquaintances, maybe former colleagues, or anyone you don't talk to directly. But the great thing about weak ties is that they are most likely to be the ones to introduce you to new job opportunities or willing to help you out for new roles. That's because weak ties are exposed to different people and ideas compared to your strong ties. Your strong ties will most likely think the same way you do and will most likely have the same outside circle as you do. You also shouldn't feel bad about using weak ties because more often than not, those same weak ties that are helping you out actually had to get help from someone else in the past. So the ideal goal is that you will be able to help someone else out in the future. This concept of weak ties applies directly to me because when I look back at all the internships or jobs that I've gotten in the past, a lot of that has been through the use of weak ties. Moving on to love. The love section is probably my favorite part of the book. If you took a poll of all of your friends and your current dating lifestyle, you will most likely fall into these two spectrums. You are either in a committed long-term relationship and potentially looking at taking the next step, or you're just floating around and being really casual with the people you are seeing. Now, this is where the book tends to give a lot of people anxiety, and it's the idea that Dr. J argues that you should be really intentional about the people you date in your 20s. So this applies to the entirety of the relationship, whether you're trying to look to date someone or whether you're in a committed long-term one already. You should be asking yourself if the person you are with is the one. So if you're currently in a relationship, the book actually gives a set of questions that you and your partner can work through that can test the long-term viability of the relationship. What was interesting was that in a bunch of studies, the happiness in couples didn't change before or after marriage, it was before and after kids. So I know this is very scary to think about, especially in your 20s, but if kids is something that you truly want in your life, it's important that you talk about these relationship issues with kids in mind. It's really easy in relationships to only think about yourself or to only think about living with you and your partner, but once you throw kids in the mix, it really starts to amplify and really test whether the person you are with is a viable option for the future. You have to start asking your questions once you have kids, who will take a step back in your career. It's really important that you ask these questions with yourself and with your partner. Also, there was a very interesting part about moving in together in the book. Typically, a lot of couples in their 20s would like to move in together before marriage. The idea is that if I'm already dating this person for a long time, it's really important that I see what it's like actually living with them. It sounds pretty logical, right? But the book actually argues against doing that. This concept is the idea of cohabitating, and the studies show that couples that do move in together before marriage and spot differences in compatibility or other red flags will find it harder to leave that partner since there is a bigger buyout to leave. It's easy to assume that once you're living together, marriage is the next step, but truly ask yourself if that is what you want and have gut-check talks with yourself. Now, the goal of that isn't to scare you off and be single forever, but the goal is to actually enforce and have open and honest communication with your partner. The couples that do actually have open and honest communication on a regular basis tend to be more satisfied and happy in the relationship. The brain and body section. This section ties more directly into the career section, but this is all about helping you build the right mindset to live the life that you want. The great thing about your 20s is that if you don't like where your life is heading, there is no better time than now to change that. The frontal lobe in your brain is still in development during this decade of your life, so you can start to develop the mindset and habits to create a positive impact in your life. The more you engage with the outside world by having a good job and building healthy relationships, you are starting to learn the language of adulthood, compared to if you spend all of your time inside checking social media and comparing yourself to others. You are going to be miserable. Throughout the book, Dr. Jay argues that social media and phone use is pretty toxic when it comes to our lives. And I have to agree with her on that. But to be honest, and we have to be real with ourselves, we are not going to be deleting social media anytime soon. But I really want you guys to check up and see how much time you're actually spending on these social media sites and truly ask yourself if there is something better you could be doing with that time. And chances are the answer is yes. So find more opportunities to put your phone down and actually engage with the world around you. Now, one of my favorite parts of the book is how to handle workplace anxiety and stress. In the book, there was an example given of one of her clients who was working as a producer in the newsroom. She was on the verge of tears every time she worked. Her boss was demanding, she felt like she kept making mistakes at work, and that she was one mistake away from getting fired. I could relate so much to that story, but one of the ideas that I loved about how to handle this is by adopting a growth mindset compared to a fixed one. A growth mindset will allow you to find solutions to those problems. And one of the things you also have to realize is that there will always be bad days at work, but one of the ways you can help yourself is by viewing those bad days as a harsh wind blowing by. And by building that mindset that it's just a harsh wind blowing by, you're going to be able to pick yourself back up when those bad days happen. Also, when it comes to work and when you're in your early 20s, it's very easy to assume that everyone around you is naturals at what they do. But the reality is that being a natural is non-existent. The only way you get to that point is by dedicating yourself to your craft and pouring hours and hours and hours into it. By pouring hours into your craft, you're going to start building confidence in your job. And once you start building confidence, you can then use that confidence to help tackle real life and challenging problems at work. And the more challenging problems and experiences you go through at work, the more callous and more experience you are building to be able to handle the bad days when they come, because you have that prior experience of being competent at your job. Finally, I'll leave with this point. As someone who's in the middle of their 20s right now, this book was a great wake-up call to guide my focus for the rest of this decade. I know that the only way I can continue to grow and mature is by actively engaging in the world. So that means committing myself to work, relationships, and myself personally. By doing all those things, I know that me and my fellow 20-somethings in the world will experience the growth and maturation that so many of us are longing for. Thanks for watching. With love and respect, Yush.